Hello, welcome to day 7 of Rediscovering Your Spiritual Gifts. Have you read the Book of Discipline lately? No, I don't imagine you have. I haven't either. Sometimes we refer to it if we have an administrative question, but most Methodists don't actually sit and read the book. But today's text on page 57 to 60 is based on the Book of Discipline section that defines the ministry of all Christians. That is what, as a denomination, the United Methodist Church believes about the ministry of both clergy and laity. And the line between those two is more narrow than you might think. I went to a church one Sunday morning about 25 years ago, and the pastor had placed a lay speaking brochure on the pew where my husband-to-be usually sat. I handed it to him. He took one look at it, handed it right back to me. And I thought, I could do that. I did a lot of public speaking at the time, and I didn't think preaching would be much different. Not a big deal. The first time I preached a sermon in lay speaking class, I was so terrified. My hand shook so bad I thought I'd fly away. And I thought, if I ever have to do this again, I'll die. And then, of course, my pastor asked me to preach the 2 congregations she served. I practiced and practiced and practiced the same sermon, and I stood in the pulpit in my home church, and I could even see the faces of people in the congregation, and the whole way through that whole rehearsal process, I was just absolutely terrified, right up until that Sunday morning when I had to go preach in those churches. After the first worship service was done, I thought, okay, obviously I'm going to live through this. It's not as bad as I thought. And after the second one, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to do this again. I was becoming a lay speaker, first local and then certified, but I was doing that helped me understand my calling to ordained ministry. Over time, lay speaking changed to become about much more than preaching, and became an even better way for laity to use their gifts and to hear their call, both to ordination and to continued leadership as laity, and to the newer forms of lay pastoring that the UMC has incorporated in recent years. I was reminded of all of that as I looked at the ministry wheel on page 60 of Each One a Minister. There are a lot of lines in that wheel, but look at those categories. Can you really separate them so starkly? Can you separate worship and congregational care, for example? Or witness from community? Or wholeness from support and encouragement? When we do one of these ministries, we touch on many of the other ministries as well. And we do that whether we're clergy or laity. I remember a lay person who read the Easter scriptures one year. He was an elderly man who didn't read very well. But when he said that one word of Jesus in the garden, Mary, carried a whole lifetime of resurrection experience. It not only proclaimed the Easter message, but it gave testimony to the value of all those elderly folks in the congregation. It was preaching and congregational care at its very best. Same's true for those areas outside the spokes of the wheel. Receive, relate, equip, and send. That's a constant pattern for both laity and clergy. We have to receive new people, new ideas, new nurturing. And we have to relate that to what we already knew and had. And then we have to constantly be equipping ourselves for what God has in mind next, making us ready to be sent out to use our gifts. I recently noticed a congregation using Facebook to campaign for their bishop to not move their pastor. Apparently, the congregation and the pastor both asked to stay. The bishop said okay, but then changed his or her mind. And the congregation was distraught. People were complaining, sharing their fears that the church would fall apart, they'd never grow again, that they couldn't continue their ministries without that pastor. People were even posting copies of letters and emails between the bishop and the congregational leaders. It was a mess. Now, I don't know exactly what transpired, and I would guess any number of things went wrong here. But imagine how different this might have been if everyone, clergy and laity, had been paying attention to the receiving, relating, equipping, and sending of those in ministry. What might the situation be if this congregation was filled with spiritually equipped laity who were not afraid to do the ministries they were called to do and gifted to do? If they hadn't seen their pastor as the only one in the congregation who could bring them growth and nurture, the only one who could do their ministries? How different might their experience of this move be if they had all seen themselves as part of the congregation's ministry, receiving, relating, equipping, and sending, including sending their pastors? Now, I don't say any of that to blame anyone, the congregation, the pastor, or the bishop, but just to say that this idea of clergy and laity both using their gifts in the ministry of the congregation is much more constructive, a more obedient, more faithful way of living out our ministries than the alternative. For today's exercise, spiritual exercise, I want you to go back and read page 57 to 59 in the textbook again. As you're reading, highlight places where you feel there's something that relates to your congregation, either something that they're currently doing or something that they need to do. Now turn back to page 60 and read that wheel again. Pick one or two ministries where you think your congregation isn't doing as much as it should, and every congregation, no matter how big or small, can find a place like that. And then list a few ways to enlarge those ministries and a few people who might not currently be using their gifts who could lead those ministries. And now look at which area or areas those ministries fall into: receiving, equipping, relating, and sending. What needs to be done to build up that portion of the work of your congregation, or a place where you don't see a lot of ministries falling? Write those things down too. Now think about how using those ideas in your congregation might both build up your ministries constructively and prevent possible future problems that could tear down ministries, and how God might be calling you to use your spiritual gifts to bring that about. Post those thoughts to your journal today. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. God bless you.